mid-20th century, Germany's Rollei and Leica were pushing out the creme de la creme of professional cameras, and Japanese companies were still mostly making cheaper copies of them. Minolta was one of these companies. In 1955, they released the Minolta Autocord, an Art Deco magic box that was marketed as a cheaper alternative to the Rolleiflex, a German TLR. Which is true, it was about half the price, and today even less than that. I bought my Autocord because I wanted a Rolleiflex. One of my favorite photo books was shot with one. But my bank account said no, so I compromised and bought an Autocord, just like all those people did in the 50s. Speaking of that book though, I'm making a video about it, and the story behind it is fascinating, so subscribe so you don't miss it. The Minolta Autocord is a twin-lens reflex camera, or TLR for short. The TLR is basically a camera with two lenses. One is for taking, the other is for viewing. To use a TLR, you look down through the waist-level viewfinder. Most TLRs are medium format and use 120 films. They take photos in a 6x6 square aspect ratio, which is a fun break from the widescreen 35mm hegemony. Of course, all of this applies to the Autocord as well. The design of the Autocord is pretty standard for TLRs. It's about half a foot tall and 4 inches wide. The lenses are surrounded by this shiny metal facade that connects the two into this avocado-shaped light cocoon. The top lens, the viewing lens, is the fairly bright View Rocore 75mm f3.2. The taking lens is a Chioco Rocore 4-element 75mm f3.5. You can use Rollei accessories on these lenses, which is great because there's a much larger ecosystem for Rollei than Minolta. Just make sure you get the right sized bayonet mount, which is called Bay 1, by the way. Flanking the taking lens are two of the critical controls of the camera, the aperture and shutter speed sliders. This is also a big differentiator from the Rolleiflex, which uses circular knobs in a similar position to adjust these settings. The shutter speed on the Minolta goes from bulb in 1 second to a maximum of 1/500th of a second, which is slow but typical for TLRs. The aperture ranges from f3.5 to f22. You read these settings through a peephole on the top of these lenses, which you can see while looking down through the viewfinder. The bottom of the camera also has a screw mount for tripods. Near the shutter speed adjustment is also an XMF flash sync mode detector. Under that is the shutter button, which is lockable by twisting the ring onto the red dot. Also, it has a shutter release screw hole thing, which means I get to screw in my Leica M soft release and pretend it's German. That's so bad. In the same position as the shutter button, on the right side is the flash sync connector. Right below the bellows is the most fascinating feature of the camera, the fact that it uses only imperial units. I mean, usually you get at least feet and meters. There's also the quick focus helicoid. I think that just means it's a smiley face. This is the most significant departure in design from the Rolleiflex, which uses a knob on the left side of the camera. It allows you to focus by moving the front of the camera closer or further from the film. Minolta moved the focus here for ergonomic reasons. Most people hold TLRs with their left hand, which on the Rolleiflex means you have to adjust your grip to your right hand to twist the focus knob. On the Autocord, your left hand never has to leave the bottom of the camera. You use your left hand to hold the camera and adjust the aperture with your left thumb, your right hand to advance the film, focus, adjust the shutter speed, and your mouth to scream in anguish whenever the quick focus helicoid inevitably breaks off in your bag while traveling. For some ungodly reason, this thing is positioned on the front of the camera, protruding far enough that the camera can fall forwards onto it easily and quickly with its entire weight, and made out of an extremely brittle metal, which has not gotten any stronger while marinating in your granddad's closet for the past 60 years. Mine was tragically snapped off on a bird scooter ride across Madrid, while secured in my camera backpack. Now yes, it needs to be understood that old cameras like this need to be treated with more care and attention than more modern professional cameras. But even when compared to cameras of the time, I think this is just a massive design flaw on the Autocord. The focusing helicoid itself is smooth and works really well, but is it really worth it if it's eminently more breakable than other cameras' focusing systems? In a vain attempt to fix my Autocord, I bought some super glue after I broke it, and while I succeeded in reattaching it aesthetically, it snapped off again under the lightest pressure. Apparently, Loctite superglue can lift a 5-ton truck, but not hold a 10-gram lever. After a bit of googling, it appears that there are people who repair the Autocord out there. Obviously, you could send it to any standard camera repair shop and they'd be able to do it, but they're going to charge you like $100, $200 because they're going to buy another Autocord for parts. And in the end, you're still sacrificing an Autocord in one way or another. But there is a guy named Carl Bryan who apparently can do a better job. So, if you're like me and broke your Autocord and are looking for a way to get it fixed, there you go. Regardless, on the right side of the Autocord is the film advance, which also cocks the shutter. It's a mechanical camera after all. Right below the advance is a distance scale, which you can rotate to give yourself an idea of the depth of field you're working with at each aperture. Two protruding metal mini columns inform you to where you need to focus if you want to use f/22 and get the maximum in-focus area, starting from infinity or the close focus distance of 3 feet. There are also two windows. The big one is a shot counter, and the one below is a warning window that lets you know when your film is ready to be exposed, when it's red. There's also a loop to put a camera strap through, so you can channel your broke Deanne Arbus. The top of the camera has this cute little Yashica logo, which now reminds you which dead Japanese corporation to burn incense for. Flop it up and you have the waist level viewfinder. Framing is perfectly easy just looking at it, but for critical focus, I highly recommend flipping down the magnifier by pushing in on the Yashica logo. It vastly increases the usability of the viewfinder if you have terrible vision like me. You can also push it all the way down for the quote-unquote sports finder, which is just a cutout on the metal on the back of the viewfinder, which lets you have an approximate frame with no focusing or mirror. The button on the rear of the hood will pop the center flap back into place so you can close it again. The experience of actually framing using this viewfinder took me a few hours to totally get used to. You're looking down, and the image is mirrored horizontally, which makes it kind of difficult to get the hang of, and may lead to a little bit of frustration. But after a while, the neural pathways in your mind just kind of like align, and everything makes sense, like, I don't know, like the Matrix or something. So don't worry about it. If you just bought one and are freaking out because you like want to puke while using it, it'll go away after like an hour or two. So, how do I load film into it? Well, the process on medium format cameras like this, for me, is a little bit more difficult than something like a Leica M6 or a Nikon F3, but it's not that bad. So I'll take you through it. Open the back by pulling the switch in the upper back left. Remove any film and move the spool back to the lower slot if necessary. Remember, you can pull out the knobs and twist them to lock them and make it easier to insert film or the spool. Take out your film and unwrap it. For this example, I'm using Cinestill 800T. Admire its beauty. Insert the film into the top slot and pull the film down from the top. Make sure it is right side up. Insert the skinny part of the film into the pickup hole on the spool. The spool does not need to be already in the bottom slot for this part, but that's usually how I do it. Crank and wind until you line the arrows up with the red dots. Close the back of the camera. Wind the camera until you see 1 on the frame counter, and you're ready to shoot. One more section before we get to image quality. So, my version of the Autocord comes with a selenium light meter. You pop open the flap on the front of the camera, set your ISO on the side, and take that number and adjust the shutter speed and aperture settings on the front of the camera till they match that number when added together. Honestly, I had no clue how to use this until I looked it up for the video, and I won't be using it after. Because even when the front lid is shut, it tells me to meter a 12 or 13, which is like f/22 in 1/10 of a second, or the equivalent. If you're an amateur, the system is just going to give you bad photos on anything darker than a cloudy day because the selenium is decayed. If you're a pro, you wouldn't trust this in the first place and are just going to meter off your phone, camera, or dedicated light meter for critical shots. Therefore, my advice is to not buy a TLR or most medium format cameras based on whether they have light meters or not, because a lot of them are useless. If you even need metering, then use another device. Over time, you'll develop a sense for what is well exposed or not. If in doubt, overexpose, especially on color negatives. Alright, finally, we get to the interesting part, the image quality. The Minolta Autocord's image quality is widely considered to be exceptional. Its 75mm, roughly 50mm and 35mm format, 4-element f3.5 lens has great image quality. Comparing my shots to the book that inspired me to get a TLR in the first place, I'm satisfied. It scratched my itch, and I appreciate the extra weight in my pocket compared to if I'd bought a Rolleiflex. The lens on the Autocord also has a certain look to it. When using shallower apertures, it renders with a certain natural smoothness, which is just beautiful. I mentioned earlier that you can use Rolleiflex accessories too, and my Autocord happened to come with the Rolleiflex close focus adapter. It works great and corrects for parallax and focusing close up. I used it for taking some pictures of my dogs, and you can see that even though my copy is not perfectly new, it certainly is not lacking in character. The bokeh on this camera looks great, but you'll need to have a strong source of light to really make it come out. Most of the time you just get a nice smooth fade into the background. The Autocord undoubtedly has the medium format look. And that comes with the depth provided by the larger emulsion size of medium format cameras. Compared to a 35mm camera, you're also generally going to get more detail, but you may be handicapped here by the quality of your scans. Anyways, the bokeh is fairly circular, but you get this amazing effect. Like, all of the background is blurred, and then parts of it are like stretched, like they have had motion blur applied, but just to the out of focus area. It's a little swirly, and more visually interesting than plain old circular bokeh. It gives photos from the Autocord a unique vintage flair. I will say, whenever the Autocord bokeh gets smaller, it tends to get a little bit more potato shaped to my eye. But I don't think it's a flaw. I like weird bokeh, but I actually prefer the pentagonal angular bokeh of the Rolleiflexes. The lens's f3.5 aperture is more than shallow enough for 95% of what I use this camera for, and it keeps the weight down compared to the Rolleiflex f2.8. Also, don't forget that all of these TLRs, including the Rolleiflex f2.8, etc., only have a max shutter speed of 1/500th. This means that if you're shooting in the daytime, you'll have to stop down anyways. Then the maximum aperture ceases to matter, unless you want to start buying or even custom ordering expensive ND filters, and then you're just complicating things. So basically, what I'm saying is, you don't need to feel insecure about only having an f3.5 aperture, because it's all about how you use it. And let me tell you, the experience of using the Autocord is great. It's really, really fun to shoot street photography with this camera, because even assuming that people care about you doing street photography in the first place, they care even less when you're doing it with a TLR. Most people either do not immediately register it as a camera or think it's cool and want to chat with you about it. It's a great way to get yourself excited about photography again, because you literally have to see things from a different perspective. You find yourself taking pictures of things that you might not usually take pictures of, and it broadens your horizons. I carried my Autocord around with me in a Peak Design 5-liter sling for a day or two last summer in Barcelona, and never felt terribly overburdened by the weight, which is about 1.1 kilograms or 2.5 pounds. The size actually left enough room in the Peak Design bag for my Leica too, so I could carry around both all day. You also won't feel terribly overburdened by the price. You can buy one of these suckers on eBay from anywhere from like $100 to $800, if you want the most pimped one, that is, with a CDS meter. In my opinion, the highest value deals are probably going to be anywhere from the $150 to $300 range for this camera. Remember while buying that they all basically use the same lens, so you're paying for minor differences in features. All the key features are the same. As a total package, the Minolta Autocord is a pretty sweet deal. You get the size, convenience, and most of the image quality of the Rolleiflex at a small fraction of the price. The usability may be even better than that of the Rolleiflex with the liver focus, but that will also be its downfall for some. Because if the camera's build quality is determined by its weakest link, then you may want to look at other options. I know after I get my Autocord repaired, I'll no longer be taking it along on my more adventurous trips, just because the focus mechanism is just too easy to break, and once it's broken, the camera might as well be bricked. If you want to see more pictures, I highly recommend you check out the Minolta Autocord Flickr group, which I'll leave a link to in the description below. It's very active and there's some very talented people posting pictures in it. And if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss my upcoming videos. I know this is supposed to be mainly a street photography channel, but since I'm trapped in suburban hell right now, I'm going to be working on some more reviews and documentary style videos. If you have anything you want to see reviewed, let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.